This is the Dairy Download, brought to you by EverAg Insights and the International Dairy Foods Association, where we offer extra sharp market and policy insights on dairy. I'm your host, Phil Plord.
And I'm your co-host, Kathleen Wolfley.
This week's episode is all about Asian and Pacific Islander culture and collaboration in dairy. We are going far afield this week to speak to guests to tell us about the work they do to help bring different cultures into the dairy space. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, Kathleen, where are we now?
Well, Phil, CME spot prices as of Friday, May 15th. CME block cheddar closed at $1.56, 7 cents lower. On the week, spot butter closed at $1.64, down 3 cents. And the spot non-fat dry milk market down to $2.27, 2 cents lower. Phil, what do you think is the most important thing right now?
Well, I think this non-fat dry milk situation remains important and maybe at a pivotal point. So down this week, first decline in 10 weeks for the spot non-fat market. 28 truckloads came to town this week, which is the most we've had in several weeks. So some of the stuff coming out of hiding. And I just wonder, so the NDPSR price finally crossed the $2 threshold. That thing's been lagging behind, but now it's at 202. And with the spot price at 227, I think it's fair to say that just about everyone now is paying a lot for powder. And, it's kind of interesting to say, well, markets work and high prices cure high prices. But given some of the lags and drags, it's been a while for the high prices to fully materialize. Well, I think we're here. And I'm not saying it's over right now, but it is interesting to see the market kind of pull back a little bit. Our contacts have been talking about a little bit of price resistance in this 225 neighborhood. And so I think the most important thing is what happens next for non-fat, and maybe we are at that inflection point.
Interesting. I know I've been watching from a non-fat perspective the trade dynamics. I've done a little bit of digging on where might we lose some U.S. opportunities into the export space. And I keep looking at Southeast Asia as that spot where it seems possible that the U.S. could start to really lose some market share into Southeast Asia, just given those wide gaps between U.S. and international pricing.
We are 71 cents above the Dutch quotation this week. We're about 67 cents above the GDT price for S&P. And so those, historically, U.S. powder cannot carry a modest premium to the world market for very long. And we are carrying major premiums. It'll work itself out, but these are big premiums.
Certainly, I don't know that you can call 70 cents a modest premium.
No, I think we have put modest in the rearview mirror. What do you think is the most important thing right now?
Well, Phil, I am keeping a close eye on the crude oil market. We're trading WTI crude nearby around 105, bouncing back to kind of levels we were trading at in early May. And it gets me wondering about consumer demand. Gas prices for this week were sitting above $4.50. I think we were around $4.52 per gallon. And when I run the math, let's say you're a 2-car household and you fill up those 2 cars once a week, 15 gallons. At $4.50 a gallon, you're paying basically $1.30 more per gallon than a year ago. So that's with your 2 cars, 15 gallons per car, about $40 more per week going into your gas tank than you spent in 2025. How does that ultimately impact the consumer? That is $40 less that folks have to spend on a pizza on Friday nights, taking the kids out for ice cream, maybe on that fancy piece of cheese in the grocery store, where we've already heard a lot of commentary in 2026 before we had this run up in crude about affordability concerns. So I just have to wonder, is the consumer budget starting to get that much more squeezed with gas prices continuing to climb? And outside of that, what about the rest of the world? Is it possible we start to see some knock-on effects in global export opportunities because people are spending that much more on gas and diesel than they were a year ago?
Yeah, so this week we saw the latest retail sales report figures for the month of April, and not surprisingly, gasoline stations led the way with sales up 21% year over year. And then you look at, we follow the food space closely, and grocery store sales were up, but below the pace of inflation. Food service sales were up, but below the pace of inflation. And so, it just seems like you're starting to see some contraction there. Um, yeah, I think it's a big, that money's going to come from somewhere, and maybe it gets tagged. We saw credit card data from the New York Fed, record levels for Q1. So it's got to come out of the wash somewhere, somehow. And I don't know if there's been a disaster yet, Kathleen, but I think we're certainly vulnerable, or more vulnerable than we've been in some time.
Well, and I think there are some parts of the economy that are more vulnerable than others, right? Where your high income consumers are still seemingly doing okay, but it's those low to middle income consumers that again are struggling with affordability, are already trying to do what they can to stretch their budgets, that are starting to feel the pinch here. So that brings me to my stat of the week. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, my stat of the week is negative 1.8%. Placer AI shows that QSR monthly visits in the month of April were down 1.8% year over year. It was kind of interesting when I was looking at the statistics, because fast casual visits were actually up on a year over year basis, full service restaurants down. So it makes me wonder, are people trading down or trading out?
It's a distinct possibility, right? And there's been a lot of attention, how quote unquote fast food doesn't seem cheap anymore. And it's going to seem, back to the gasoline story, right? It's going to seem that much less cheap if there's $40 less in your pocket every week.
And then let's not forget there's this whole element of GLP-1 that's lending a lot of question marks today.
Not coincidentally, right? And that's my stat of the week, Kathleen. Interesting story in the Wall Street Journal on data gathered by William Blair. According to a survey of GLP-1 users, 74% said they were eating less pizza. More than 70% said they were eating fewer burgers as well. And so, we've been talking about this in various ways for some time. And it's not a fall out of your chair number at this point, because I think we know that pizza has been on the rough side of the street on the GLP-1 conversation. But to see that 74% say they're cutting back on pizza that's a pretty big number. And you just want to talk about cheese demand. I think it hits right at the heart of cheese demand. I mean, it is not like, oh, there's a little bit of cheese there. No, there's a lot of cheese there on pizzas, and you have somewhere between 10 to 15% of Americans using these medications, and it starts to add up. So that's my stat of the week: 74% of GLP-1 users eating less pizza.
Phil, it's always a happy day when we get new little tidbits on the GLP-1 story, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when you slacked me that stuff yesterday, I was like, oh, it's like there should be like little fireworks that go off when we start trading GLP-1 stories. It's like I go, oh, whoa, yeah.
News alert, news alert. All right, Phil, I've got a fearless prediction.
Okay, can I go first?
Sure.
I think it's tied to. I'm trying to have a nice segue here, right? Because if we're eating less pizza and eating less cheese on our pizzas in America, we're gonna have to export more cheese to kind of keep prices afloat, right? So my fearless prediction is that for the year 2026, the US will export more than 1.6 billion pounds of cheese. And that would represent an 18% increase over the 2025 total of 1.352 billion. Now, year to date, we're up 23%. So you might say, oh, Phil, here you go again with your softball predictions. But I think that, I think there's some, I think we'll see the pace ebb and flow a little bit as the year goes on. 1.6 billion would be a big number. And I think I think we're going to cross it the way things are going.
Okay. I'm also going to go with a cheese prediction. We get a cold storage report on Friday, May 22nd. And I'm going to take the over on the 5-year average cheese growth from March to April. Typically, we see, at least in the last 5 years, zero growth in inventories between those 2 months. So I think we will see something positive from March to April.
I mean, right? Less pizza demand, cheese demand has been, less burger demand. That's not good for cheese either.
The export piece, though, to your point,
that could be the swing factor there. But yeah, the market just feels a little heavy, doesn't it? And that usually means that the stocks are piling up.
Yeah.
I'd bet with you on that fearless prediction. I'm going to root against you, but I would bet with you.
All right, Phil, with that, let's get to our first guest.
We're excited today to have Julian Reti Kaukau with us. Julian is the head of Māori engagement and partnerships for DairyNZ. DairyNZ is an organization that helps New Zealand dairy farmers lead the world in sustainable dairying by investing in research, new solutions, and advocacy. Julian, welcome to the Dairy Download.
Thank you for having me.
Let's just start with this. Māori have been part of New Zealand dairy for generations. How did those communities become involved in the dairy industry in New Zealand? And what has that journey looked like over time?
Oh, cool. So the first cattle were brought here by the Anglican missionary Samuel Marsden in 1814. They came here from Australia along with other domesticated farm animals. These cattle were not in dairy herds in the modern sense, but they laid the foundations for the later development of New Zealand's dairy industry. Māori became involved with cattle farming relatively quickly after cattle were introduced to New Zealand in the early 1800s. Initially, involvement was centered around the mission stations and trading relationships with Europeans, but by the 1830s and 50s, many Māori communities had actively adopted European farming methods and were becoming highly successful agricultural producers. In the early years, Māori engagement with cattle farming was practical and strategic. So hapu, which is a collective of family members with the same ancestors, recognized that cattle, wheat, potatoes, pigs, and other introduced farming systems could strengthen tribal economies and provide new trade relationships and opportunities. Māori-owned cattle and dairy herds began pairing sort of in several key districts during that sort of some of that period between 1840s and 50s. Some historians, depending on who you're talking to, describe the 1850s as a period where Māori were among the most significant food producers in the colony. Māori produced meat, milk, butter, labour to both domestic and export markets, and in some regions, Māori agriculture enterprises were economically outperforming many European settlers because of the strong collective labour systems and access to large land areas. The late 20th century marked an important turning point for Māori. Treaty settlements, Māori land development initiatives, and the growth of Māori agribusinesses enabled many hapu and iwi and Māori organisations to rebuild the economic base. Māori entities began reinvesting into dairy farming, purchasing farms, developing land, and establishing sophisticated agribusiness structures grounded in intergenerational thinking and kaitiakitanga, which is ethical stewardship based on traditional values. Today, Māori are significant contributors to the New Zealand's dairy sector. Māori-owned dairy farms collectively manage substantial large assets and are increasingly recognised for balancing commercial performance with cultural, environmental and social outcomes. Many Māori dairy businesses operate with a long-term worldview that prioritises not only profitability, but also whakapapa, which is genealogy, ancestral connection, environmental stewardship, whānau well-being, and the protection of whenua for future generations. So during that early period of cattle farming in New Zealand, Māori were actually very involved, not only as labourers, but as landowners, producers, traders, and agricultural innovators. Their role in the early agriculture economy is often under-recognised in mainstream New Zealand history.
So let's take a half step back for members of the audience who aren't familiar with who or what the Māori population is and the history, a brief history of the Māori people in New Zealand.
Māori are the indigenous people of the land, which is known as New Zealand. But when it was only the Māori here, the land actually had no land. We used to, depending on which part of the country you lived in, some were referred to as Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, Te Ika a Maui, the great fish of Maui, or Te Waipounamu, the great stone of the south. So there's many sort of names, but today we sort of come to the name around Aotearoa New Zealand is what we call this land. And how Māori arrived here, we arrived here in the Great Migrations. There was multiple migrations from the year 900 AD through to the 1300 AD. And they say that we came down through the Pacific, and then we settled the lands over a period of 300 years, and became accustomed to the whenua, as we say. And in terms of who we are today, Māori make up around about 22% of the agricultural primary sector in terms of asset ownership. We have a lot of strategic entities throughout the country, which we call iwi entities, that look after the assets belonging to those tribal regions that have an ancestry or a whakapapa connection to those particular areas. And Māori are also significantly involved in the dairy sector today. We also have our own dairy industry competition awards called the Au Whenua Awards. And this year will also be the dairying segment of that competition. So in terms of who we are today, most of us have ancestry of whakapapa dating back from the original ancestors that first settled here, but through today also we also are quite mixed in terms of the relationships that we've sort of had over the last 150 years, and a vibrant and forward-thinking population, I like to think, and good strong contributors to the New Zealand economy. So,
what are the most important contributions the Māori farmers and Māori-owned entities have made to the dairy sector's growth and resilience?
Māori farmers and Māori-owned entities have made significant contributions to the growth, resilience and long-term sustainability of New Zealand's dairy sector, both economically and culturally. One of the most important contributions has been the intergenerational approach Māori bring to land stewardship and farm management. Unlike short-term commercial models focused on annual returns, many Māori agribusinesses operate with a whakapapa-based worldview where decisions are made not only for immediate profitability, but for the well-being of future generations. This has strengthened resilience within the sector by encouraging long-term thinking around soil health, water quality, environmental sustainability, and succession planning. Māori farming entities have also contributed through collective ownership and governance models. Māori corporations, trust, and iwi organisations often manage large and complex land portfolios while balancing commercial performance with cultural, social, and environmental responsibilities. Another major contribution has been innovation and adaptability. So Māori farmers have consistently shown an ability to adapt farming systems to changing environmental, economic, and social practices and conditions. So many Māori dairy businesses have been early adopters of what we call regenerative and organic dairying practices, for example, integrated environmental planning, riparian planning, freshwater protection initiatives, and diversified land use models, all to protect the whenua. So this reflects the strong connection Māori maintain with the whenua, which is land, and te taiao, which is the environment. And so on that, Māori have also played a critical role in sustaining rural communities and workforce capability. For generations, Māori have contributed as farm owners, share milkers, managers, stock agents, contractors, and skilled rural workers in many regions, and the labour that Māori have provided and also the leadership have been central to the operation and success of the dairy industry. So, importantly, Māori agribusinesses have also helped reshape the conversations within the wider sector of the dairy industry, and Māori perspectives have increasingly influenced discussions around sustainability, water management, climate resilience, biodiversity, and the social license to operate here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Concepts such as kaitiakitanga, manaakitanga, and collective well-being are now becoming more visible within mainstream agricultural thinking, and Māori farming leaders have played a major role in bringing those values to the sector. So today, Māori-owned dairy entities collectively manage significant agricultural assets across Aotearoa, New Zealand, and their contribution is not simply about production or economic value, it's also about demonstrating that profitable farming and cultural responsibility can coexist. So in many ways, Māori agribusinesses are helping shape a more resilient, values-driven future for New Zealand dairying.
Sort of interesting, right? I mean, the Māori people are sort of the first organic dairy farmers, right? I mean, in a way, it's that rich history. Let's go to the future, though. What does the future of Māori involvement in dairy look like, and what changes or opportunities are you most excited about?
The future of Māori involvement in dairying is incredibly significant, not only for Māori communities, but for the future of direction of New Zealand agriculture as a whole. Māori agribusinesses are continuing to grow in scale, influence, and sophistication. And I think we are entering a period where Māori values, Māori leadership, and innovation will play an increasingly important role in shaping the sector. So one of the biggest opportunities is the growing strength of Māori-owned farming entities and iwi agribusinesses. So through the treaty settlement process, land development and intergenerational investment, Māori are rebuilding economic capacity and expanding their presence across the dairy industry. And many Māori organisations now manage large-scale farming operations with highly professional governance structures and strong long-term strategic thinking. So what excites me most is that Māori are not simply replicating conventional farming models. Many are redefining what success in dairying looks like. There's a growing movement towards farming systems that balance profitability with environmental restoration, cultural well-being, and social responsibility. So Māori agribusinesses are increasingly demonstrating that strong commercial performance and deep kia o te whenua, and also water, freshwater management, soil management, biodiversity management, all can coexist with a profitable agricultural enterprise. I also like to think that the future lies heavily in our rangatahi. So rangatahi is our youth leadership and knowledge integration, and passing that knowledge from one generation down through to the next. And more young Māori are entering the sector as farm managers, scientists, environmental planners, veterinarians, governance leaders, and agribusiness professionals. At the same time, there's a growing confidence in combining mātauranga Māori, so Māori local knowledge and wisdom, and combining that mātauranga and being able to incorporate it more along Western science models, technology, innovation to develop farming systems that are both productive and sustainable. Another area of opportunity for the future is around climate adaptation and environmental leadership. As the dairy sector faces increasing pressure around especially freshwater emissions, biodiversity, and the right to be able to farm, Māori perspectives around kaitiakitanga, land stewardship, and intergenerational governance and responsibilities offer valuable guidance for where the industry may need to head in the future. That's the New Zealand dairy industry as a whole. So ultimately, I think the future of Māori involvement in the dairy sector is about more than increasing ownership or increasing production. It's about restoring balance, reconnecting farming with whakapapa, identity, people, and places. That is something that can benefit not only Māori, but the entire New Zealand dairy sector as a whole. So moving forward in the future.
Julian, fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for coming from a half a world away to join us on the Dairy Download.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for your time.
Here's another perspective. We're thrilled to have Sudeep Jain with us today. Sudeep is the Director of Quality at Michigan Milk Producers Association. His team supports everything from regulatory and food safety to product development and sustainability. Sudeep, welcome to the Dairy Download.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Kathleen.
Sudeep, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. So I've been with Michigan Milk Producers Association for about 8 years now. And I lead our efforts, like you said, in quality, product development, and some aspects of sustainability. Prior to that, I spent about 12 years with a cheese company called Luprino Foods in Denver, Colorado. So working with their corporate QA team, product development teams as well, and got to tour around the country to all of their production facilities during that time. And prior to that, I spent some time working in India for a big dairy cooperative called Amul. So I've worked in the dairy industry for past 20 plus years now.
Now, MMPA has a partnership with Amul in India. Why did it feel like the right moment for both cooperatives to work together?
Yeah, no, this is a good question. So if I go back in history, like this goes beyond even my time. Like Amul, the founder of Amul actually went to school at Michigan State University back in the 1940s. So there must be something brewing in his mind at that time, and he has since passed away. But he came to MSU for his education, went back home and started what we in India used to call it the White Revolution, which is
Okay.
basically equivalent of the Green Revolution for the dairy industry, like increased milk production, increased processing capacity, and things like that. So fast forward many years from the 1940s to about 2018, a team of people from Amul and other co-ops visited the US, and MMPA hosted that group to kind of share the wisdom and understanding about how the dairy co-ops in the United States work. So the introduction started at that point, and we've been in discussions with Amul since then because they wanted to start with some different products in this market at that time. And the pandemic hit, so things kind of slowed down a little bit during that time. And when the time was right after COVID and all that, so they had an interest to bring a product at a very fast pace to introduce their brand into the US. And we were already producing milk at our newly acquired acquisition at that time, Superior Dairy, which is located in Canton, Ohio. So the stars aligned right. They had a need for a product to be brought to the market super fast. We had the right resources at our disposal. And so we started working together. And almost 2 years ago, right on Mother's Day, was the first production run of this new milk product that they wanted to introduce in the US.
So what is the new milk product?
So it's actually 4 different products. 2 of them are, which we in the US, we are very familiar with, the 2% milk and the 3.25%, what we call as the whole milk. But growing in India, in the dairy industry there, a lot of milk production comes from water buffaloes. Water buffalo have higher protein and higher fat compared to standard cow milk. So the clientele and the customers there is very much used to the higher fat product. And the mouthfeel associated with it, the viscosity of that product, and the end use of this product, which is used for a variety of applications, including dessert making, even for drinking purposes and things like that. So we introduced 2 variants of the product. One is at 4.5% fat, and the second one is 6% butter fat.
Those are some high fat milks. Holy smokes.
Yes, that is high, and it does give a characteristic like anything that you make with either sugar, salt, and fat tastes good. So this is kind of falling in those lines. Yes.
Okay, so how does that compare to like a half and half in terms of
Half and
fat?
half is about 10 to 11% fat.
Okay.
So it's still a little less than that, but it's definitely a richer milk.
Okay. Now, Amul's products are deeply tied to culture and a sense of home for many consumers. How did MMPA approach producing and distributing a product that carries such strong cultural meaning?
So I think it all starts with relationships. The first thing we aligned with Amul on the same principles of cooperative ownership. Like the way co-ops in the US work versus co-ops in India work are about the same in terms of collective ownership. Everything is for the betterment of the farmers and making sure that they get the best value out of the product that they are producing. Not just milk, like there are co-ops in other sectors also, but the same basic principles align. So I think that was a good starting point for both the organizations to align with that we are driven by the same core principles. Then we took a team from here, which visited their co-ops. We went to some of their farms. And when I say farms in India are a lot different compared to what we are used here in the US. So we met with some of their milk producers. We went to the milk collection centers, and we spent a lot of time with their technical team as well to understand their requirements. They in turn came and visited our facility. We took them to our farms, showed them milk production in the US. We also spent sizable time together working in our production plant to basically dial the product specification to their requirement and make the product to which suits their specification.
So you talked a little bit about water buffalo milk. and the difference in taste and flavor compared to, let's say, a US product. Yeah, we can get the butter fat higher on a US product, but how do you keep that same taste of home between a product that's being produced from a different type of milk in India compared to the US?
So definitely fat percent is one big driver for it. The second one is some of the processing conditions in terms of the temperature of pasteurization. Back in India, the raw milk quality is a little different compared to what we get in the US. So the processing temperatures are a little bit on the higher side. So we tweak those things as well to make the product to, which is kind of, it's not going to be exactly the same to what is produced back home, but it is on parity on a lot of the sensory attributes.
How about from a farmer perspective? How does this partnership benefit MMPA members?
Right. So MMPA operates based on one philosophy that we need to think local and act global. What I mean by that is, like, we are residing in the state of Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Wisconsin. So our farmer base is here. We're working towards betterment of the farmers who are the members of our co-op and trying to get the maximum value of milk that we can for their benefit. And to collaborate with the global companies like Amul gives us access to a new market that is people, a lot of diaspora from the Indian subcontinent, not just India, but neighboring countries also, and all the way till the countries in Middle East are very, very familiar with the Amul brand. So they had a need to bring fresh product to the consumers who are already used to the product that they make back home, the taste and the nostalgia that comes with it. So it's good for our farmers, like if you see the news these days, there is plenty of butter fat coming in from the farms, and this product is a good outlet for us. So it's a win-win situation for everybody. It gives a consistent home for the milk that is produced by farmers of our co-op. It provides a reliable and a very good quality source of product to Amul that they could invest into going into this market. So it's a win-win situation for all of them.
How about the consumer reaction? Have consumers in the US been excited about a new high fat product on the marketplace that has that taste of home?
Yes, so I think I'll give it the answer in two parts. The first is consumers who are already familiar with this product, like growing in India or visiting there, or had other products which are imported from India to the US. So the brand recognition is there. A lot of people started talking about it on social media, TikTok, Facebook, and those kind of things. So a lot of buzz happened during that, like, because people were like, we have heard anecdotal stories from people who grew up in India, then immigrated to the United States 30, 40, 50 years ago, and had a memory of milk product with the Amul brand name. And when they saw the familiar name here, some very, very excited customers even called us to provide compliments associated with that and how they enjoyed having the recognition. And the second one is about the local US customer or the local US consumer. Like, if you think about it, the US consumer is very, very brave. It's like they are always open to try new products from different cultures around the world. If you think about it, Italian food, Mexican food, even Indian food is very, very common. And a lot of cuisines from the entire world can be found in the US. So the US consumer over the years has always evolved to, okay, I'm good with my meat and potatoes, but they are also looking for, like, what is new from across the world. So there has been a lot of acceptance of this product from the local consumers as well.
What about the future? How do you see this partnership evolving? What does it say about the future of global collaboration and innovation in the industry?
So I'll start with the narrow focus first on what is next. We are already working with Amul team to come up with some other products, and we'll talk more about it as we complete the product development cycles towards that. But they have a huge portfolio of 100 plus different items that they produce in India. But to bring it here is kind of difficult. So we're in talks with them to figure out formulations that can be successfully produced in the US. So that's one thing. The second one is collaboration, like dairy industry in the US has been talking about for a long time that approximately 1 out of 6 truckloads of product that we produce here gets exported in terms of milk solids. So there is a lot of international influence in the dairy production in the US anyways. Now, rather than sending our product outside, we are increasing the demand of the product in the US.
Well, that's great, Sudeep. Congratulations on helping to shepherd this partnership together. And thank you so much for sharing your insights with our listeners.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's a wrap for today's show. As always, we want to thank our production team, Mariah Minnick, Andrew Jerome, and Jeff Cullen at IDFA, and Abby Bauer over here at EverAg. If you are interested in what Kathleen and I do for our day jobs, check us out at ever.ag. Remember, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button, leave us a positive review on your favorite podcast platform, and tell a friend or three.
Thanks for listening to the Dairy Download. Until next time, stay sharp.